Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I decided we're gonna be doing and talking about budget techs because I think it's a good thing to sort of point out a couple things that are very much accessible in the meta and that you can pick up when you're on a budget. And fun fact, everything we're gonna be talking about today, I calculated through roughly. And if you spend about $180 to $200, including shipping and stuff like that, you should be able to acquire all of these. And obviously this doesn't need to be a purchase you do once and all together, but if you slowly get your hands on all of these cards, they're not going to cost altogether that much. So there's that, and we're gonna cover monster spells, traps. We have everything. We have about 30 cards to cover. So let me know what you think. Let me know which cards you maybe already have or plan on picking up, or which I maybe gave you an idea for. Also, a lot of you are still not subscribed yet, and I would love for you to subscribe so you're a part of this community. And with all of that being said, we can go ahead and get started. First, we're going to talk about monsters. And the first card I want to cover is going to be Sign Frame Gear Gamma. So Gamma at first was quite expensive, but that was a long time ago. And since then, it has had many printings, and it's a very strong card. Not every single strategy can main deck it, but for sure, it's an incredible side deck staple because you do need impactful hand traps going second, and it's very accessible. The next one is going to be Pankratops, and Pankratops is just, it's legit. There's no expensive Pankratops print. You can get the secret copies for a couple more dollars, but that's, if you really want. But yeah, Pankratops is something you can legit get like 10 copies to have it lay at home, and it's not going to cost you anything. And it's a very important monster, actually, going second in the side deck. If you maybe don't know which card to put in as the 15th, or if you truly just want to run it because it's not bad, it's not always very applicable in every single format, but it is strong. And yeah, since it's at 1, more than likely you will have space to run it, especially if you're on a budget. It's a very good choice. Then we have Token Collector. It's around $4, and it's one of the strongest cards in today's format, in my opinion. Every single deck uses tokens, and they really need tokens to get their engines going, especially the Brave token engine, but that's just one of them. You stop swords, so you stop a lot of things. And the Token Collector, like I said, it's very cheap, and you can easily get your hands on 3 copies. Then we have 2 that were actually reprinted in the Alba structure deck. They are overall quite accessible on their own, but I'm talking about Effect Veiler first. And Effect Veiler is just, it's a very generic hand trap. And yeah, of course, it isn't exactly infinite impermanence, but it does the job really well. And especially if you're playing a deck in which you can also abuse Needle Fiber together with Selene and Axis, Effect Veiler is a really good choice. And also the second one that got reprinted in the Alba structure deck is going to be Ghost Ogre. Ogre is very cheap right now, and all of the other copies aren't exactly expensive, but if you're really on a budget, the Alba structure deck provides a lot of cards that got reprinted, and I'm gonna mention a lot of them actually moving forward also. So those 2, Veiler, Ogre, definitely something to pick up. Then we have Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. Now this card is very specific. It's not exactly great in every single format, but I still think it's one of these cards that you should keep on hands because when this card is good, you can really abuse it. And in today's format, I would actually recommend you side it in some decks because, well, if you have space and if you have the kind of meta where you go to your locals, regionals, whatever, that you can afford also in your deck to run a couple extra deck monsters, or even in your side deck if you have space, whatever you want to do. But if you want to run those monsters so you can disrupt other strategies, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is incredibly accessible, like 40 cents or something. So it's very cheap, and I think you can do a lot with it. Then we have Kaijus. Radiant and also the Thunder King Kaiju actually got reprinted in the Alba structure deck, but I want to mention Kadarla and also Gamesio because they are the lowest attack stats, so they are easier to beat over and get rid of. So those are the Kaijus people more than likely will lean towards, and they are both very cheap after a couple reprints, and you can actually get them in like an ultra printing or something. So it's not exactly a common you're gonna get, but it's still going to be very cheap. And kaijus are a great form of removal. And yeah, I would definitely recommend you have a couple. Then we have Lancia, a very strong side deck card, I would say. For the last, I guess, couple of years, actually, it has been a staple in the side deck. So I would keep a couple on hand, and it's only about $1. And when you can use Lancia against the deck, you will definitely skip their turn. Then we have a couple more to go through. There's Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, and a couple more. But Ghost Mourner is incredible, I think, because it does a similar thing to Veiler, but you can actually use it in a couple situations on your turn as well, and it serves a great purpose, especially when you're trying to get something like Scythe negated, which Scythe lock is happening a lot in today's meta. So Ghost Mourner, if you have a couple copies, I think is a good addition to the side deck. Even the main deck, if you want, whatever budget you're on, where you want to use it, it's whatever, but it's very cheap and accessible. Then the next card is going to be Phantasme. So Phantasme is about $2 for the gold alternate art. That's not exactly that pretty, but it's only about $1 more if you want to invest in the old art ultra. And Phantasme is a very, very strong card, I think, especially if you're going in a setting where a lot of people play link decks, and obviously a couple of like the main decks like a prank kit, stuff like that, they will go into a link at some point in time. So if you're just trying to go through your deck, go through your resources, see your hand traps, Phantasme is definitely a good choice. And then we have two more left. One is going to be Lava Golem. Now, Lava Golem, if you're not using your normal summon, is a great addition to your deck. I would definitely recommend you side Lava Golem if you want, if you're on a budget. If you're in that kind of setting, like I keep mentioning, side decks are very much dependent on your own personal meta. But all of these staples are something you can definitely have just, you know, in your binder, so you can get the cards out and use them in the proper meta and in the proper deck. And Lava Golem is definitely something like that. It's very cheap, it's very strong, you know, deals with the board very, very easily. And yeah, you can use it if you're running a deck that can afford that. And then the last card is going to be DD Crow. DD Crow is one of those hand traps that's not exactly that strong. You know, more than likely you will need to pair it with something else to actually, you know, deal with your opponent. But it does get rid of a couple things in the graveyards that might prove them to be a problem. You know, something like DPE, something like an annoying Outlish the Golden Lord, or whatever you want to get rid of. DD Crow, it's a very, very nice card if you use it properly. It's very cheap also, so you can definitely get a couple copies. Then moving on to the spells, the first one is going to be Shared Ride. And now Shared Ride has got a rare, gold rare, if I'm not mistaken, printing. That's about $1. And it's a very cool card to have. Usually cards in decks, in the meta are going to search. So you will plus, especially if you're trying to see your other hand traps. And if you're going first, you know, throw a couple copies in and just have them in. Obviously, I would recommend it for the side deck. We're not exactly in the Sky Striker Mirror Match format. But yeah, Shared Ride is a very cool card to side and is very cheap and accessible. The next one is going to be Called By. Called By is a staple, in my opinion, and also it got reprinted in the Alba Structure deck, so I would suggest you keep 3 copies just in case it ever goes to 2 or 3. I don't think it's going to happen, at least not in the near future, but cards that are cheap, I would always recommend you keep more than 1 copy on hand. And yeah, Called By, definitely a staple. I would main it. It's incredible. If you're not maining it, at least side it, but it's very, very, very strong. Then we have Dark Ruler no more, and I love the fact that Dark Ruler keeps getting reprints in the Alba Structure deck. It's only about $3, and it has been so expensive for such a long time that it's so nice we can get our hands on accessible, cheap copies, because it's a very, very strong card, and it's not exactly droplet. Sometimes it's even better than droplet if you cannot really afford to ditch cards in your deck, anything like that. Like, just you know, have Dark Ruler, and it deals with boards very easily. You need to take into account which deck you're going to side it against, but I would definitely suggest you have a couple copies. And then the next card is going to be Super Poly. Super Poly, I think, is actually going to be even better as the time goes on, and Despia is starting to become more and more popular, because I do think it's going to take over quite a bit, but we'll see. That's not exactly important right now. I would definitely have Super Poly, you know, in my binder if I were you, regardless. And it's only about $5, and even its targets are very cheap. Starving Venom is like $2, and all of the other cards are very, very cheap that you would want to go into with Super Poly. So I would suggest you have a couple copies. Then we have Raigeki, and since Raigeki came to 3, I would cite it if I were you. If you don't exactly have Lightning Storm, and even Lightning Storm is not that great in every single format, especially when you would play against an Eldish player that has the Sky Prison monster anyway, then you're not doing anything with the Lightning Storm. So at that point, you can just have Raigeki, and you use Raigeki when you need to side it against decks that really struggle when you get rid of their board. And then Pot of Desires. Now, obviously it went to 1, but because of that and overall, it's just very, very cheap. It's like $2, and I would definitely keep 3 copies in my binder. I don't think it's going to return, at least anytime soon. Yeah, but it's a great card. If you can run it in your deck, just have the 1 copy in your deck because it's busted. And it's very cheap, like I said. And similarly to another Pot card, Pot of Extravagance got reprinted in the Alba structure deck. So if you're running that kind of deck, but regardless, like, Extravagance is cool and all, but I would just suggest you get the structure decks. Like, legit just buy structure decks because they have incredible value inside of them, meaning the actual cards you can put in your side deck, and they're all very, very cheap and accessible if you want to get them separately. Whatever you want, Extravagance is definitely something I would suggest. If you're trying to play that kind of deck in the future, like, you will not know, you know, just get your hands on the Extravagance copies and you'll be good, you'll be set, and you know you have them. And then we have a couple back row removals. So Cosmic Cyclone just got reprinted in the Duel Academy Speed Duel box, and it's very, very cheap and accessible. And the next card is Twin Twisters, and it's also so cheap. It got so many reprints, and that's great. With cards like these where you really want to have those copies, it's cool that they reprinted them so many times, that they are incredibly, incredibly cheap and you can have them. Then we have Magical Spring. Now this one is very specific, and it is a bit more expensive if you're comparing it to some other cards on the list. It's about $5, but it's so cool because it has a very niche application. Like, drawing is cool and all, but you can actually prevent sites from being destroyed. And if you lose, if you have that kind of deck that you're going to lose if you get site locked, then definitely I would suggest and recommend you run Magical Spring, because you do prevent sites from being destroyed, so you prevent yourself from being site locked. Then we have Offerings to the Doomed. Now this card was a tech in one of the YCS lists, and it basically just pops a monster at the cost of your draw phase. It's very, very accessible if you don't want to exactly play it because of the draw phase, I guess, restriction. It's also understandable, but I think it's quite a strong card. The pop is very strong, and like I said, it's cheap. So you might as well get a couple copies and just have them. Even if you're not planning on playing it anytime soon, you still have them on hand. And then we have 2 cards that are both about $2, and it's Forbidden Chalice. This is the first one. Similarly to Mourner and Effect Veiler, it's not exactly impermanence, but it has a good application. So I would definitely also have that. So you can just decide whichever card you want to run. And the next one is going to be Mystic Mine. It's getting more and more accessible because of the new reprints, which is nice because it was getting quite expensive, and that's like, well, kind of annoying when that happens to cards, when they're really generic and you can just have a couple copies and you can run it in a couple decks like Sky Striker, like Prank Kids. There's a lot of applications, so if you're running any type of that deck, or if you just want to side it in a meta where people don't tend to main deck any kind of back row removal, you can also get away with just activating Mystic Mine and winning that way. I know it's kind of it's kind of lame, I guess, but it is a win condition in itself. So yeah, why not side that? If it's accessible, helps you break the board, helps you bait and negate, and also, yeah, it's cheap. And then just a couple of traps, and then we're done. We have Solemn Strike first. Strike is not exactly as great as Judgment, but it's very cheap. So if you're running any kind of deck that uses traps, I would definitely recommend you invest in Solemn Strike. And then we have Different Dimension Ground. This is used mainly, I've seen it be used in Striker. It's very busted and it's also very cheap. It basically skips your opponent's turns. I would definitely recommend you invest in that card. And then the next one is going to be D-Barrier, that also got reprinted in the Alba structure deck, and it's also very format dependent, but cheap, and also very strong when you use it. And then we have Red Reboot. Red Reboot is incredibly cheap, and definitely you can just win off of it so easily. It is a 1, it is sacky. But when you are in a tough spot against a back row deck, Red Reboot really comes in clutch. So I would suggest you side it if your deck can afford to run it, and if you know that your deck can easily OTK, I would definitely use Red Reboot. And then to round things off, we have a couple floodgates. First we have Anti-Spell Fragrance, and Anti-Spell is just it's very, very strong. And it's there's almost no downsides to it. If your deck can afford to run Anti-Spell, definitely run it. And then we have Rivalry. We have, you know, the other two also. Rivalry is very applicable if you have that type of deck, and in almost every single meta, I would say, you can use it. And then the next two are going to be Gozen Match, and also there can be only one. So first, Gozen. Gozen is so busted against something like Prank Kids, against Brave Token, for example. Like, you will always find a spot for Gozen Match, I think. If you're playing that kind of deck, and if you are in that kind of meta and you can afford to run that, it's very busted. And then the next one is going to be There Can Be Only One. It's also very applicable in most of the metas. And the meta decks sometimes also, you can use it in something like Prank Kids or Outledge, but you really need to play around it. And obviously there's a plethora of other decks that you can use. There can be Gozen and Rivalry in, and more than likely it is going to be applicable, at least one of those three, in a certain meta or format. So yeah, that would pretty much be it. I think we went over quite a couple cards, and hopefully I gave you a couple ideas as to what you can pick up. Let me know which cards you maybe already own, which cards are you planning on picking up, and yeah, if you got anything out of this video, I'm very happy, I'm very grateful, and if you enjoyed, make sure to like it, give me a sub, check out all of the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace!